kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kayang magiliw, telas ng sinangalan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, kuya ka ng magiting, sa manlulupin, di ka pasisingil, sa nagatang tutok sa simoy at sa langit mong pagaw, ay hinatang tula, kawin sa pagkayang minamahal. Ang islang ng patawad mo'y tagumpay na nag-iingin, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magtitingin. Luma ng araw ng walhagin pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang inigaya ng pagkay mga aking, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
A prayer for teachers. Giver of all wisdom and greatest of all teachers, look upon our teachers with love. Grant them the resolve to nurture our eager minds and to never give up on us who fall behind. Bless their hearts, for they rejoice when we succeed and encourage us when we fail. Endow them with gentle patience, for the path of learning is never easy. Kindle a spirit of passion in them. It is the flame that ignites the love of learning in us. Help them see the potential in each student. Their belief in us means much more than the grade we make. Instill in them a commitment to keep on learning. It shows us to not fear new knowledge and experiences. Inspire them to touch the future. They influence how big a dream we dream for ourselves. Bless our teachers who have come before, for their work endures to this day. Let the light of your example shine upon all teachers, to build up with their words, to love with their mind, to share with their heart. Amen.
Hello everyone, I'm Melanie Cortez from Pagalangang National High School and welcome to our second season of webinar series on science content and teaching strategies for the second quarter of the school year 2020-2021.
I am Minandro S. Reyes from Jose C. Payumo Junior Memorial High School. Good morning, Ma'am Lani.
Yes,
Truly,
sir.
this day is a blessed day because our teaching skills and strategies will be enhanced by our capable speakers for today.
Indeed, it is a wonderful day to everyone. To formally open our webinar, it is a privilege for me to introduce our dedicated, humble, and spirited supervisor in science, Mr. Edwin Riel Vermilio, for his opening remarks.
Happy New Year, everyone. My respect and greetings to our school's Division Superintendent, Dr. Romeo M. Alip, to our Assistant Schools Division Superintendent, Sir William Roderick Fallurin, to our Curriculum Implementation Division Chief, Dr. Milagros M. Peñaflor, to the Program Management Team, Learning Facilitators, Science teachers from grade 3 to senior high school, including alternative learning system, to our dearest students and parents, magandang buhay po sa ating lahat. Positive feedbacks were received from the first wave of our webinar as a good start that signified that the science department could conduct webinar in the different grade levels from grade 3 to senior high school using this platform and live stream at Bataan Science Channel. Expectedly, the task of teachers will be more challenging than before, considering that in this new normal setting, we in the SDO Bataan need to embark appropriate strategies and approaches to be able to realize our desire to make science education continue amidst this health crisis. This second wave of our webinar series is aiming again to enhance the content knowledge and pedagogical skills of our science teachers as necessary preparation for us to effectively deliver the most essential learning competencies and skills to our teachers and learners for the second quarter. This webinar series is only part of what we intend to do under the new normal to augment the educational needs of our students. It is a perfect tool that offers a myriad of information on science content, teaching strategies, and innovation in support to science curriculum that will help them to adapt to changes in the latest teaching and learning system under the new normal. To our learning facilitators and program management team, thank you very much for accepting this challenge. I know we can do this with God's grace, and we will be able to survive and face the whole new world of educational learning experience with confidence, integrity, and most of all, with the different competencies that we have. Maraming salamat po sa lahat. God bless everyone. Keep safe po.
Thank you so much, Sir Bermilio, for the warm welcome. And this event will not be able to pursue without the approval and blessing of our CID Chief. Now, let us hear it from our CID Chief, Division of Bataan, Ma'am Milagros Peñaflor.
Hello everybody, good to be with you again after the first quarter. Here we go to the next station, the second quarter. Thanks to you, my dear science teachers, for the continuous effort of providing our learners with skills, not only for mastery, but most importantly, for developing higher order skills on critical thinking and creativity. My gratitude to our science supervisor, Dr. Edwin Berbilio, for all the initiatives. This move really provides our unit, the Curriculum Implementation Division, a great help in realizing its goal of providing basic education services to our clienteles. On behalf of our Schools Division Superintendent, Dr. Romeo M. Alip, I would like to congratulate the Science Department, our teachers, our department heads, our principal science coordinators, for improving science instruction that eventually lead to improving learner performance. Thank you for all your efforts. Congratulations, and God bless us all.
Thank you, Ma'am Mila, for a heartfelt and inspiring message. Your support to our division is indeed great help and encouragement to continue in our endeavor as our CIDG Chief. Thank you so much.
As a reminder, everyone will be given an opportunity to raise questions for today's presenters and post it to the question window of the control panel even during the presentation, and we'll give them time for them to be addressed. And now, without so much ado, we do know that everyone excited to enhance our learning. With that, Ma'am Lani, would you please introduce our first facilitators in today's venture? Nakamute po kayo, Ma'am Lani. And we're back. Okay po, talagang ganyan kapag may July. Minsan nagkakaroon ng technical difficulties. But anyway, Ma'am Lani, will you please introduce our first facilitator for this venture?
Thank you, Sir Drew. It is a great privilege for me to introduce to you our first facilitator this morning, Ms. Argy Atuan, Teacher 1 from Bataan National High School, with her topic, Movement of Plates.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Division webinar series on science content and teaching strategies in the context of the most essential learning competencies for the second quarter. I am Ma'am RG Atuan, Teacher 1 of Mabatang National High School, your discussant for today's Earth Science lesson.
To begin with, here is our target competency for today's lesson. Explain how the movement of plates leads to the formation of folds, faults, trenches, volcanoes, rift valleys, and mountain ranges. To be more specific, I unpacked two objectives. First is to state the continental drift theory and plate tectonic theory, and then we have to identify the different types of plate boundaries, its movement, and the geologic features it will form.
Here are the main points of my presentation for today. First is the continental drift theory. Second is the plate tectonic theory. Third is all about plates. Then the three types of plate boundaries, the movements of each plate boundary, and last, we have the different features formed under this type of plate boundaries.
Let us now start our lesson through questions to ponder, or trivial questions that you might know, which is something to do with our topic for today. So for our first question, what is the largest fault in the world? What do you think is the answer to this question? To give you a hint, it became a movie during 2015. The answer to this question is the San Andreas Fault. Did you know that the San Andreas Fault is a right lateral transform fault between the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate? It is located in California, and it is one of the most famous faults in the world. The San Andreas Fault is 700 to 800 miles long and approximately 10 miles deep. It is about 28 million years old. Another questions to ponder. What is the deepest trench or place in the world? You got it correct. The answer to this question is the Mariana Trench. Did you know that the deepest section of the Mariana Trench is called the Challenger Deep? It was named for two ships that have explored its depth with sounding equipment, the HMS Challenger and the HMS Challenger II. The trench is believed to be one of the most ancient seabeds on the planet at approximately 180 million years old. Despite the lack of light and the hostile acidic condition in the trench, a surprising number of organisms live there. There are more than 200 known microorganisms and small creatures that live there, including crustaceans and amphipods. Here in the Philippines, we also have trench, and it is also considered as one of the deepest in the world. It is known as the Philippine Trench with a depth of 10,540 meters. Let us now proceed to the third question. What is the most active volcano in the world? The volcano which was considered to be the most active in the world is the Kilauea volcano. Kilauea volcano in Hawaii has been erupting continuously since 1983. World's most active volcano is difficult to objectively measure, but geologists don't seem to have a problem ranking it at the top. Kilauea's longest period of inactivity was just 18 years, between 1934 and 1952. How about here in the Philippines? What is the most active volcano here in our country? We can all agree that the answer to this question is the Mount Mayon. Mount Mayon is an active volcano famous for its almost perfect cone shape. The cone is considered to be the world's most perfectly formed volcano for its symmetry. Mayon volcano is the iconic landmark of Albay province. It has an elevation of 2,463 meters. Mayon volcano is the Philippines' most active volcano with a recorded eruption of 48 times within a span of 400 years. The very first recorded eruption of the volcano was in February 1616. Let us now proceed to question number 5. What is the world's largest rift valley? The world's largest rift valley is known as the Great Rift Valley. The Great Rift Valley is a geographical and geological feature running north to south for around 4,000 miles from northern Syria to central Mozambique in East Africa. Astronauts say it is the most significant physical detail on the planet that is visible from space. For question number 6, what is the highest mountain above sea level? The answer to this question is, of course, the Mount Everest. Mount Everest is the world's highest mountain above sea level at 8,848 or 29,029 feet, and once seemed unsurmountable. Everest grows about 4 millimeters a year. The first recorded person to reach the summit of Everest was in 1953. Since then, more than 4,000 different people have stood on the top of Everest over 7,000 times. How about here in the Philippines? What is the tallest or the highest mountain in our country? The answer is Mount Apo. Apo volcano is the highest mountain in the Philippines, and its name means master or grandfather. There are no known historic eruptions, but the volcano is considered still active. I hope that you've learned something from those questions. All of these features, such as fault, mountain, volcano, rift valley, trenches, and folds, are formed due to the movement of plates. Let us all find out how these things happen with today's science lesson.
Let us recall some concepts and definition for us to better understand how these plates are moving. The Earth's interior is divided into several layers, starting from the outermost to the innermost layer. First, we have the crust, which is the thinnest and topmost layer of the lithosphere. It has also two types, the oceanic and the continental. Then we have the mantle. The mantle is the mostly solid bulk of Earth's interior. The liquid layer of the mantle, which is known as the asthenosphere, is a part of the mantle which convection currents occur. And last, we have the core. The core is the very hot, very dense center of our planet. And it is divided into two, which is the outer core, the liquid part, and the inner core, which is the solid part. After knowing the Earth's interior, a question that all of us might think of is that, what gives an idea to our scientists in the past that the continents are moving? What are the evidences that the plates are moving? And to answer this question, we have here the two theories, the continental drift theory and the plate tectonic theory. Let us have first the continental drift theory, a theory which states that the continents were once a single supercontinent called Pangaea. It is a Greek word which means all land. Over time, the supercontinent slowly broke apart into what we have today. The proponent or the person behind this theory is Alfred Lothar Wegener. Alfred Lothar Wegener is a German meteorologist and geophysicist who remembered as the originator of the continental drift theory by hypothesizing it in 1912. But what made Alfred Lothar Wegener say that the continents are drifting? What other evidence for continental drift theory? Wegener's curiosity about the idea of drifting continents started when he noticed that the edge of South America and Africa in a world map can be fitted like a jigsaw puzzle. Would this observation of edges of continents be enough proof that the continents are drifting? What other evidence gathered by Wegener to support his continental drift theory? Here are the evidences gathered by Wegener supporting his claims that the continents are drifting. Just like what he noticed, the continents are like puzzles that can fit together. Another evidence are the fossils. Similar fossils were found on coastlines of different continents. Next are the rock types. Mountains that appear on one coastline also appear on another continent across the ocean. Then we have the coal deposits in Antarctica. Then, the ancient climate. And last, we have the glacier carvings. Despite all the gathered evidences of Wegener supporting his idea about drifting continents, still, the scientific community rejected him for some problems. First, he estimated the speed of continental motion to 250 cm per year, which was unbelievably high. Second, he cannot explain what causes the continents to move. And it took many years before the continental drift theory was accepted. The material in the Earth's crust are constantly in motion, and we call this movement as the plate tectonics. Plate tectonic theory. According to this theory, the lithosphere is broken down into plates that ride or float on the asthenosphere. Remember that the asthenosphere is the liquid part of the mantle where convection current occurs. Most plates are composed of both continental and oceanic crust. Tectonic plates, this section or pieces of crust are called plates. When we talk about plates, there are actually 7 major plates on the Earth that are moving extremely slowly but continuously. For the major plates, we have the Eurasian, African, Australian Indian, North American, Pacific, Antarctic, and South American plate. For the intermediate plates, we have the Caribbean, Cocos, Nazca, Arabian, Philippine, Juan de Fuca, and Scotia. We have 2 main types of plates. We have the oceanic plate and the continental plate. These are the 7 major plates which accounts for 94% of the Earth's surface area. We have the North American plate, the South American plate, the Pacific plate, the African plate, the Eurasian plate, the Australian Indian plate, and last we have the Antarctic plate. What causes these plates to move? Plate tectonics is made possible by the process known as convection current at the Earth's mantle. Remember that one of the processes of heat transfer is through convection. Convection is a process of heat transfer in fluids. Convection happens when there is a significant difference in temperature between 2 parts of a fluid. Hot fluids rise and cold fluids sink, and then currents or movements are created in fluid. Convection happens in the mantle as well. Convection cells in the mantle move the plates. Hot in the center, less dense magma rises up due to heat. When the magma reaches the surface, it cools and sinks back down, creating a circular pattern of movement. This process happens continually. The heat in the mantle mainly comes from the Earth's outer core due to the decaying radioactive elements. Convection current exists due to the difference in the temperature between the upper and the lower mantle. Plate tectonics provide an explanation for Wegener's drifting continents, as lithospheric plates move and so the crust, creating landforms and other tectonic activities. Now that we know the cause of the movements of plates, let us all find out what are the different movements of plate and how these movements create various features.
The movement of plates happens at the plate boundaries. This is the border between two plates, just like in these puzzle pieces. The parts wherein they fit together is what we call the plate boundaries. There are actually three types of plate boundaries. We have the divergent boundary, the convergent boundary, and the transform boundary. Let's take a look at this illustration showing the three types of plate boundary and its movement indicated by the arrow. For divergent plate boundary, as you can see, the movement or direction of the arrow is away from each other or in the opposite direction. With the transform plate boundary, as you can see, the arrow slide past to each other. And for the convergent plate boundary, the movement or the direction of the arrow is towards each other.
Let's take a look briefly on each type of plate boundaries, starting from divergent boundaries, or also known as constructive plate boundary. As two plates move apart, it creates a zone of tension and form a gap where molten material will emerge and solidify, forming geologic features such as volcanoes or mountains. On land, divergent boundaries within continents initially produce reefs, which produce reef valleys. And under the sea, the most active divergent plate boundaries are between oceanic plates, and they're often called mid-oceanic ridges.
Here are the examples of features formed under the type divergent or constructive plate boundaries. First, an example of this is in Iceland. The island of Iceland is actually being pulled apart and the results are lava fountains, like the Krafla volcano. So in this type of boundary, which is the divergent, one of the features that it can form is a volcano. Another features formed under divergent boundary is the Rift Valley. For this example, we have the African Rift Valley or also known as the Great Rift Valley. And last example for this type of plate boundary is the Red Sea. The Red Sea is spreading. The land to either side is actually pulling away. The Red Sea continues to get bigger each year.
Next type of boundary are the convergent boundaries, also known as destructive plate boundary. As two plates collide, a collision zone is created and one of the leading edges of a plate will be subducted and destroyed. That is why it is also known as destructive plate boundary. Plates are pushing into neighboring plates. Usually, a subduction zone occurs. That is when oceanic crust crashes into and slides under continental crust. There are three types of convergent boundary or collision that can occur. First is the continental to oceanic crust collision. Second, oceanic-oceanic collision. And then we have the continental-continental collision.
Remember that the plate has two types. We have the oceanic plate and the continental plate. In convergent boundaries, there are three types of convergent collision. We have the continental oceanic. Second is the oceanic-oceanic. And the third one, we have the continental to continental collision.
Let's take a look at each type of convergence. This illustration shows convergence between oceanic crustal plate and continental crustal plate. As different crustal plate collides, the leading edge of the oceanic plate bends towards the mantle since it is denser than a continental plate. And the bending of a denser leading plate towards the mantle is called the subduction process. As what I have mentioned, the bending of a denser leading plate towards the mantle is also known as subduction, and that subduction zone will create deep trends. Ocean trends are the deepest part of the ocean. Like for example, we have the Mariana Trench and our very own Philippine Trench. The subducted denser leading edge, which is the oceanic crust, will be melted, forming magma. Addition of volatile materials such as water will cause magma to become less dense. This allows magma to rise and reach the edge of the continental crust, and it will eventually form into volcanic arc. Again, the geologic features formed under this type of convergence are trench and volcanic arc. Another type of convergence involves sinking of oceanic lithosphere beneath another plate of oceanic lithosphere. Converging oceanic plates will cause formation of trenches, and these trenches will become sources of earthquakes. Aside from trends, the leading edge of the subducted plate will eventually reach the mantle, causing it to melt and turn into magma. The molten material will rise to the surface, creating a volcanic island arc parallel to the trench. Did you know that many parts of the Philippines originated from oceanic convergence? This resulted from the convergence of two oceanic plates with one plate diving under the other. The third type of convergent plate boundary is the continental to continental collision. When two continental plates converge, a collision zone is formed. Unlike the other two types, subduction ceases happens in this type of convergent plate boundary. What does it mean when we say subduction ceases? It means that there is no trench, no volcano, and no island arc are created in this type of convergent plate boundaries. Instead, it leads to the formation of large group of tall mountains called mountain range. Did you know? About 40 to 50 million years ago, two large land masses, the India and Eurasia, collide to begin the formation of the most visible product of plate tectonics, which is the Himalayas. And last, we have the transform plate boundaries. Transform plate boundaries, or also known as conservative plate boundaries, it is where plates slide past each other. The relative motion of the plates is horizontal. They can occur underwater or on land, and crust is neither destroyed nor created. The presence of an oceanic ridge is an indication of diverging plates, and as the plates diverge between the two segments of the mid-ocean ridge, the adjacent slab of crust are grinding past each other, forming transform fault. Transfer fault is the contact between two plates that slide horizontally past one another, commonly connecting the two mid-ocean ridges. Because of friction, the plates cannot simply glide past each other. Rather, stress builds up in both plates, and when it exceeds the threshold of the rocks, the energy is released, causing earthquakes. At transform plate boundaries, there is no subduction or volcanic activities. The only major feature that we see at these boundaries are earthquakes and faults. Most transform faults are located within the ocean basin. There are few that cuts through the continental crust, like the San Andreas Fault.
Did you learn something from our lesson today? Let us all find out through answering these questions. Which type of plate boundary occurring between Australian plate and the Pacific plate? As you can see, this is the Australian plate and this is the Pacific plate. So what type of boundary or plate boundary exists between these two? Very good. The correct answer is the convergent boundary. Why? As you can see on the arrow, the movement of the arrow is towards each other. And when we talk about that movement, it deals with convergent boundary. Next question. Which type of plate boundary occurring between the Caribbean plate and the Eurasian plate? So this is the Caribbean plate and the Eurasian plate. Again, what type of plate boundary exists between these two? Correct. The answer is divergent boundary, because as you can see on the direction of the arrow, it is away from each other or on the opposite direction.
Third question. Which type of plate boundary occurring between North American plate and the Pacific plate? That's right. The correct answer is transform plate boundary. Next question. Which geologic features formed under convergent plate boundary? The correct answers are volcanic arc and trends. And for our last question, which geologic features formed under transform plate boundary? Very good. The correct answers are earthquakes and faults.
Right.
We also discussed the three main types of plate boundaries. First is the divergent plate boundary, or also known as constructive plate boundary. It is where two plates are moving apart. Then we have the convergent plate boundary, or also known as destructive plate boundary. It is where two plates are colliding. And when we talk about convergent plate boundary, it has three types as well. We have the oceanic continental collision, the oceanic-oceanic collision, and the continental to continental collision. Then the third type of plate boundary is the transform plate boundary. It is where plates slide past each other. And what are the geologic features formed under each type of plate boundary? For divergent plate boundary, we have mountain, volcano, and reef valleys. For convergent plate boundary, we have trench and volcanic island arc. And for transform plate boundary, we have earthquakes and faults. Thank you for attending. Once again, I am Ma'am RGG Atuan. Good day and God bless.
Thank you, Miss RG Atuan, for sharing your knowledge to us. And now, to continue our webinar, let us proceed to our second facilitator, Mr. Francisco de Guzman, Teacher 2 from Luwacan National High School, with topic Different Ways on How Representative Animals Reproduce.
To my fellow science teachers, to our very supportive Science Education Program Supervisor, Dr. Edwin Real Bermilio, and of course, our very own CID Chief, Dr. Milagros M. Peñaflor, a pleasant morning to all of you. Welcome to another Division webinar series on science content and teaching strategies in the context of most essential learning competencies for second quarter. I'm Francisco de Guzman, Teacher 2 from Luwacan National High School, Maine, and currently teaching General Chemistry 1, and Earth and Life Science. Today, I'll be your resource speaker and we will discuss the second quarter of Earth and Life Science, Week 3, which is describe the different ways of how representative animals reproduce. So, it focuses on the animal reproduction. There are 3 objectives for this session. Number 1, compare and contrast the sexual and asexual reproduction of animals. Number 2, create a graphic organizer of different ways on how representative animals reproduce. For number 3, appreciate the value of reproduction. Before we start our discussion, let's have first our activity. All you need to do is identify which characteristic of living things is illustrated in the image. You may type your answer in the chat box or in the comment section. I'll give you 10 seconds for every illustration for you to have time in answering. For number 1 illustration, the correct answer for number 1 is living things metabolize. Next image. The correct answer is living things adapt and evolve. The third image. Okay, for number 3, living things reproduce. For the last image, the correct answer for number 4 is living things respond to stimuli. There are 2 questions to answer. Number 1, what organ systems are shown in number 3? Let's go back to item number 3. So we have the female reproductive organ and male reproductive organ. And second question, what could be the purpose of the organ systems in item number 3? So, alam na natin lahat ng sagot dito. It is for reproduction. Another activity is to arrange the steps in sexual reproduction in humans in the diagram. You may choose your answer in the box. So for participation, you may type your answer in the comment section. So this is the diagram. So we have 3 steps for male and also 3 steps for female. For the processes leading to pregnancy, we have 7 steps. Let's start with male. So there are 3 choices for male. For letter A, sperm cells exit the testicles and travel up the vas deferens. For letter B, sperm is made in the testicles. And last letter C, sperm cells mix with semen. So what would be the first step? The first step is letter B. So nafo-form muna yung sperm. The second step is letter A. So ang sperm cell ay umalis at nagtatravel papunta sa vas deferens. And the last step is letter C. Ang sperm cells ay mahalo sa semen. For female, these are the choices. Letter A, eggs enters fallopian tube. Letter B, ovulation occurs. And letter C, lining of uterus thickens with blood. So, what would be the first step for female? Okay, correct. Letter B. Ovulation occurs. Kapag sinabi natin ovulation occurs, ito yung pagre-release ng egg cell mula sa ovary ng babae. And the second step naman is letter A. Egg enters fallopian tube. So from the ovary, alis naman ang egg cell at mag-travel to sa fallopian tube kung saan hintayin niya ang sperm cell na mag-fertilize sa kanya. And then the last step natin is Letter C. Lining of uterus thickens with blood. So, bakit nga ba nagtitikan ng blood that occurs during the menstrual cycle of women? So, kapag ang egg cell hindi na-fertilize, ang effect is demenstruation. Kaya minsan, kapag regular ang menstruation ng babae, at siya ay may partner o asawa at hindi siya dinatnan, isa lang ang ibig sabihin nun, na-fertilize yung egg at ang female or woman na ito ay pregnant. Para naman sa sagot leading to pregnancy, ano kaya sa mga choices natin ang first step? So, makikita natin that the male and female have already produced the gametes or sex cell para maging posible ang union nilang dalawa, pero hindi mangyayari ang union if there is no mating of female and male. What would be the first step? Okay, the correct answer is letter G. The erect penis inserted into vagina, that process called sexual intercourse. So, when a female and male is having sexual intercourse, the penis is inserted to the vagina of the female. Next to that, leading to the meeting of the sperm and the egg is letter A. So, during sexual intercourse, the penis enlarges and ejects sperm cell to the vagina. And the process of the ejection of the sperm cell is called ejaculation. Next step is letter F. After the sperm has been released inside the female reproductive organ, it will travel through the cervix, uterus, and into the fallopian tubes. So, how many sperm we are talking about? So, millions of the sperm cells. So, ganun kadami ang na-inject na sperm during one ejaculation. So now, what kind of environment is experienced by the sperm cells? Harsh environment. Kung i-relate natin, that's why out of millions of sperm cells, talagang pagdating nito sa fallopian tube, kaunti na lang sila. So maybe few hundreds or less. Kasi ang katawan ng babae is killing the sperm cell that enters the woman's body. So that's why tayo na nag-exist, we are 1 out of the million chances ng sperm from our father. Next is letter B. Isang sperm cell lang ang mag-fertilize ng egg out of millions deposited during the sexual intercourse by the male. Isa lamang sa million ang mag-fertilize ng egg cell. Next step is letter E. Kapag nagkaroon na ng fertilization, mag-start na mag-divide ang cell. Next step is letter C. The cell or yung na-divide na cell called the zygote, it will travel through the fallopian tube to the uterus. So mula sa fallopian tube kung saan nag-meet ang sperm at ang egg, bababa na ito sa uterus. Paano kung halimbawa hindi nakababa ang zygote sa uterus at nagstay lang siya sa fallopian tube? Masasabi ba na pregnant pa rin ang babae? The answer is yes. Although this type of pregnancy is called ectopic pregnancy at usually hindi nagiging successful. Lastly, the cell attached to the wall of uterus for the implantation. So, dito na mag-start ang development ng zygote papuntang fetus hanggang sa mag-develop at bago lumabas bilang full-grown baby. These are the processing questions. So, some of the answers are already presented in the previous activity, so pwede nating balikan. At any rate, subukan nating sagutan. For number 1, what process is the release of a sperm cell during sexual intercourse? The answer is ejaculation. So, sometimes yung ibang male, they associate the Tagalog term into the act of doing it. But in English term, the ejaculation is the release of the sperm. Number 2 question, what is fertilization? And where does it happen? So, fertilization, mga keywords siguro na dapat tandaan is union. Pag-iisa ng sperm at egg. Saan ito nangyayari? sa fallopian tube. Number 3 question, what is cell called after fertilization? And where does this cell attach and develop during pregnancy? So ang tawag sa nagde-develop na cell initially after fertilization is the zygote. At ito ay bababa mula sa fallopian tube papuntang uterus kung saan ito mag-i-implant at magde-develop. For number 4 question, if sperm cell and egg cell doesn't meet inside the woman's body, can babies be still produced? So, meron daw bang pagkakataon na si sperm cell at egg cell ay pagtatagpuin hindi sa loob ng katawan ng babae? Pwede ba itong mag-develop into baby? And for number 5, how does sexual reproduction occur? So, those are the 5 questions. Now, let us proceed with the discussion on the animal reproduction. The same with plants, animals may reproduce sexually and asexually. Let's proceed first with the asexual reproduction in animals. In asexual reproduction, it also needs a single parent or one parent, and this parent can actually produce new organisms. Again, in asexual reproduction, it does not need sex cells or the sperm cells and egg cells. And the offspring are identical with each other and with the parent. One of the advantages of asexual reproduction is that it happens in a short time, and at the same time, there is a less energy needed in order this to happen. It is because the organism doesn't need a mate or doesn't need to find a mate and does not need to undergo sexual intercourse. On the other hand, one of the disadvantages of asexual reproduction is that it lacks genetic variation. It is because it only comes from a single parent. And this means if there is a specific phenomenon that could wipe them out, they could actually wipe out because they not vary with each other. Now, what are the ways on how animals produce asexually? The first one, through binary fission. So from the word binary, which means two, so organisms divide into two new organisms. And these two new organisms are exact copies of each other or with each other. It happens through mitosis. There are 3 types of binary fission. So we have the regular, longitudinal, and the transverse. An example of organisms that undergo binary fission are paramecium. A very common examples are the bacteria. So we have here examples of organisms that undergo binary fission. So we have here for letter A, that's an amoeba. So that's amoeba splits into 2. The 2 new organisms are now separates into individuals. For letter B, that's a euglena. This is a longitudinal fission, so it separates longitudinally. For letter C, that is a paramecium, divides in a transverse plane, so it divides in this portion. And we also have the serracium. This is the oblique division, so it divides here. We also have the budding. A new organism develops from an outgrowth or bud due to the cell division at one particular site. The new organism remains attached as it grows, separating from the parent organisms only when it is mature enough. So we have here the parent organism, and there is a particular site or there is a portion of this parent cell wherein a bud can develop. So this bud can mature, and once it is mature, it can break apart from this parent, forming now a separate individual, and that is called budding. On the other hand, we also have fragmentation and regeneration. So fragmentation and regeneration happen in partner. In fragmentation, the parent splits into pieces and the pieces may form into new organisms. So we have here a planaria. This platform, for example, broken apart, so the broken pieces could form into a new planaria. This is the head, and the head could form into new individual. And then this is the tail, still could form into new individual. On the other hand, for the regeneration, which is always happen with partner with fragmentation, this is just the renewal, restoration, and growth that makes organisms. So we have here the C star again, for example, if the piece or arm of the C star is broken apart, a new arm would be developed from the last part. And broken arms could actually develop into new organism. We also have the parthenogenesis. This is the growth and development of embryos without fertilization. So basically, there is no involvement of sperm cell and egg cell. Example of organisms that reproduce asexually through parthenogenesis are the Komodo dragon. And we have example here. So we have the honeybees. So in honeybees, when there is fertilization, the male contributes the sperm cell and the queen or the female contributes egg cell. There is fertilization, therefore, in the process, they could actually a new organism. And if there is a fertilization, the organism developed is actually only a female. So it can develop into worker, so specifically into sterile female, or it could develop into a queen. On the other hand, if there is no fertilization, the egg cell could also develop into new organism. So there is no fertilization in this process called as parthenogenesis. There is no union of sperm cell and egg cell. What is only involved in parthenogenesis is the egg cell. So the egg cell could develop into new organism, and if fertilization or the parthenogenesis is the process, it could only develop a male honeybee, specifically called as drone. Now for sexual reproduction in animals, this is the process wherein there is a union of sperm cells and egg cells. This only happens in dioecious. So when we say dioecious, these animals only contain a single reproductive system and at the same time can only produce a single type of sex cell. For example, for us in humans, males can only produce sperm cells and female can only produce egg cells. This can also happen to hermaphrodites, like for example, earthworms and some fishes, or organisms that have both the sex cells on their body. On the other hand, this can also happen in sequential hermaphrodites, wherein some portions of their life cycle, they can become hermaphrodites. So they are dioecious, but in some portions, they are hermaphrodites. Example of hermaphrodites are the earthworms. There are 3 steps in sexual reproduction. First is the gametogenesis, or the production of sperm cells and egg cells. And then spawning, and the last one is fertilization. For gametogenesis, this is just the production of gametes in gonads or in the sexual organs of these organisms. Example for the gonads, for male we have the testes, and for female is the ovaries. For spawning naman, this is the bringing of gametes together. In other words, this is the copulation or the sexual intercourse. Last one is the fertilization, in which the union of sperm cell and the egg cell. And fertilization can happen in two ways. One could be internal and the other one is external. When we say external fertilization, this is sometimes called informal fertilization. And this external fertilization mostly happens in fish and amphibians, in which the external fertilization, the union of the sperm cell and egg cell, happens not inside the body of the organisms, but happens in the environment. So in case of fish, the female fish just releases the egg cells, while the male fish releases the sperm cells. And in the environment, randomly the sperm cell and egg cell might unite, and that is called external fertilization. On the other hand, for internal fertilization, it is just the opposite of external fertilization. It takes place inside the body of the organism. So the internal fertilization happens if there is a copulation or the sexual intercourse or the physical union that aids in the delivery of sperm to the female's body. And once fertilization is successful, the developing embryo can be either found inside the body or inside an egg. Examples of oviparous organisms or organisms that develop their embryo in an egg are the reptiles and fish. On the other hand, we have the viviparous. These are the animals that carry their young inside their body until their young are mature enough to be born alive and live independently. Very common example for this one is as humans. For this one, we have the egg-laying animal, which is the oviparous. And the second one, we have the dog, which is the viviparous. This is a related lesson to our discussion. For additional topic, let us talk about in vitro fertilization. So, in vitro fertilization is a complex series of procedures used to help with fertility or prevent genetic problems and assist with the conception of a child. During the in vitro fertilization, mature eggs are collected from ovaries and fertilized by sperm in laboratory. Kung maaalala nyo, yun isang tanong natin sa activity, kung possible raw ba na ang sperm cell at ang egg cell mag-meet sa labas ng babae, and the answer to that is yes. And the process is called in vitro fertilization, where the sperm and the egg union is assisted sa isang laboratory. So, sino yung mga gumagawa o nag-undergo ng in vitro fertilization procedure? So, mostly yung mga mag-asawa na hirap magkaanak o makabuo ng bata. Posible na isa sa kanila ay mababang sperm count, so hindi sapat yung sperm count to support the need para yung sperm ay masucceed na makapunta sa fallopian tube. So what happens? Kukuha ng mature na egg sa ovary ng babae, kukuha ng set ng sperm sa lalaki at i-fertilize ang sperm at ang egg sa laboratory. Madami rin application ang in vitro fertilization sa animal reproduction. May mga animals na critically endangered or at yung population ay, and sometimes these animals hindi ganun kabilis magparami. And what scientists do, they harvest the sex organs mula sa animals na ito and they try to invent para kapag ang union o fertilization, ilalagay nila ito sa katawan to develop. To understand better the in vitro fertilization, so let's try to watch interview conducted news to Mr.
Ang pagkakaroon ng anak ang makapagbubuo ng isang pamilya. Pero paano kung hindi ka mabiyayaan ng sarili mong supling? Pipiliin mo ba ang surrogacy sa tulong ng siyensya o ang pag-aampon ng hindi mo kadugo? Yan ang ating Bandila Extra. Ito ang kwento ng negosyanteng si Joel Cruz. Hindi niya pinagkakaila na sa pamamagitan ng womb for hire o surrogacy niya nakuha ang kanyang kambal na anak.
Gusto magkaroon ng anak, no? And everybody knows na I'm gay, so wala naman akong asawa na babae. Yung longingness ko na magkaroon ng anak ever since it.
Sa Moscow ay pwede ang surrogacy para sa mga single parents. Ayon sa isang fertility expert, traditional surrogacy ang procedure na pinagdaanan ni Joel.
When it comes to traditional surrogacy, it can be IVF or artificial insemination. Okay? So IVF, same procedure, but this time we get the eggs from the surrogate, we fertilize and culture, and then transfer it back. Yung insemination naman, yung sperm lang ng lalaki, we process, we wash, and then we place it inside the uterus. So parang natural fertilization inside the surrogate.
Dumaan si Joel sa mahabang proseso at gumasta ng husto para magkaanak.
I received an email. Congratulations, Mr. Cruz. You're now you're going to be a father. Hindi ako nakatanggap ng ganitong salita na magiging tatay ka na.
Nag-uumapaw ang kaligayahan ni Joel ngayon at pangarap niya, pagyamanin ng mga anak ang negosyong ipapamana niya sa kanila.
We do not have laws for surrogacy. There are no laws saying that we can do surrogacy, no laws saying we cannot do surrogacy. The Society of Infertility Specialists, we do not do surrogacy. Una-una, the church is against that.
Malabo ang batas ng womb for hire o surrogacy, lalo na kung may perang pinag-uusapan, para umarkila ng matres na magdadala ng anak ng iba.
Sa ngayon, wala tayong batas tungkol sa surrogacy. Ang meron tayo ngayon ay ang ating family code, kung saan sinasabi doon magulang ng mga batang isinisilang nung tinatawag nating mother.
Para sa fertility expert, hindi rin katanggap-tanggap ang surrogacy sa Pilipinas.
Isa sa mga problema din siya. Kasi definitely, pag pinag-usapan natin ng pera, may exploit dyan. Kahit na ayaw mo dahil may pera, tatanggapin mo.
Para naman sa simbahan,
surrogacy ay something quite unethical because that is not fair to the child. It is not within the context of marriage. The unity of the marriage is put on question. Napakahirap na ako halimbawa yung anak ko ay alam ko hindi galing sa aking misis. Those are realities that do not unite husband and wife. No?
Sa kaso naman ni Joel Cruz, malaki ang pinagbago ng kanyang buhay nang magpa-surrogate siya sa ibang bansa.
I'm so excited to see my children to my mom. Yung gano'n na parang kahit ako'y hindi tunay na lalaki, yung gano'n I'm gay, but parang somehow she'll be proud din sa akin na may anak din ng anak ko, yung gano'n. Nagkaroon din siya ng apo sa akin.
In the meantime, na wala pa tayong batas, mag-ampun na lang. Magpag-ugnayan sa DSWD kung sino mang gustong magkaroon ng anak.
Points to remember. So we are able to describe the sexual reproduction in humans and animals. We also compare or describe the asexual reproduction to sexual reproduction of animals. So we have the budding, fragmentation, and the parthenogenesis. And gaano nga ba kahalaga ang reproduction? It is very essential for the perpetuation of the species para yung population ng isang organismo or organism ay magpatuloy na mabuhay. We also inform the process of in vitro fertilization na kung saan the mating or the union of the sperm and egg can happen outside the body of woman. For the last activity, let's try to answer these questions based on the given figure. So you may type your answer in the chat box or in the comment section. What type of asexual reproduction in animals is shown in the figure? The correct answer is fragmentation. What type of asexual reproduction in animals is shown in the figure? The correct answer is budding. What type of asexual reproduction in animals is shown in the figure? The correct answer is parthenogenesis. Next, what type of fertilization is exhibited by the organism in the figure? Is it viviparous or oviparous? Okay, dogs exhibited internal fertilization and also they are viviparous. Next, what type of fertilization is exhibited by the organism in the figure? Is it viviparous or oviparous? It's obvious they are exhibited external fertilization and they are oviparous. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. I would like to take this time to thank to all teachers. Alam ko sa panahon na to marami po tayong ginagawa at tinatapos na mga reports. Huwag po natin kalimutan bigyang pahinga ang ating sarili. Ingat po ang lahat.
Thank you, Sir Francis, for sharing your very informative presentation. And now, let us listen for our third facilitator, Ma'am Alma Garcia, Teacher 2 from Hermosa National High School. Let us all be ready to fill up with a substantial spice with her topic, immune system.
Hello everyone, my name is Alma Garcia, Hermosa National High School, your speaker noon. I can wait to get started and learn more about biology too. I hope to teach some important things today like immune system, the basic structures and functions, and also the factors that affect our immune system. All I ask of you is that you sit back and relax. And welcome the new year full of eagerness and willingness to learn things that have never been. So let's have a fantastic year. Once again, welcome to our division webinar series on the science communication strategies in the context of the milk for second quarter. The immune system is the basic defense system of the body that protects us from harmful pathogens and diseases. The immune system consists of various types of cells and different proteins that kill the harmful invading microorganisms and protects our body from diseases. In this presentation, we will discuss about the human immune system, what is the basic structure of the human immune system, and how it functions. Then we will also look at some of the factors which affect your immune system and the differences between the innate and acquired immunity. So let's begin with the immune system. The overall function of the immune system is to prevent or limit infection. When the immune system first recognizes invasion by pathogens, it responds to address the problem. If an immune response cannot be activated when there is sufficient need, problems arise like infections and other diseases. On the other hand, when an immune response is activated without a real threat or is not turned off once the danger passes, different problems arise, such as allergic reactions and autoimmune diseases. So let's look at the basic structure of the immune system. The immune system essentially consists of three layers of defense that protects our body from various types of attacks, from microorganisms and even non-living things like toxins, metals, etc. And each layer consists of different mechanisms of immunity. And when one layer is breached or invaded, the mechanisms of the layer below it come into an action until the attack is successfully controlled. The first and basic layer of human immune system is the barrier immunity. Below is the innate immunity, and finally, we have the adaptive immunity or the acquired immunity. So let's decode these terms one by one and understand about the basic structure of the immune system. So the first layer defense in human immune system is the barrier immunity. And the most important part of this immunity is of course the skin. Skin is considered as the largest organ of the human body with an average surface area of 1.73 meter square. In simple terms, physical barriers prevents pathogens such as bacteria and viruses from entering the organisms. The skin not only provides a physical barrier that prevents any pathogens from entering your body, but it also provides protection by means of chemical and biological barriers. Skin cells produce and secrete important antimicrobial proteins that kill the invading microorganisms. The skin also contains immune cells that help to stop the microbes from invading our body. The shredding of the skin epithelium, also known as desquamation, helps to remove bacteria and other infectious agents that may have adhered to the skin surface. Similar types of barrier immunity is also provided by many other surfaces present inside our body and includes the surface lining of our respiratory system, the gastrointestinal system, the genital urinary system, and the surface lining of our nose and pharynx. All types of these surfaces provide a physical barrier that prevents the attack from pathogens, and they also provide various types of chemical antimicrobials which try to stop the invading pathogens at a very early stage. For example, the surface lining of our respiratory system has this small hair-like structure or projections that are known as respiratory cilia. A special property of the cilia is that they have a particular direction of movement by virtue of which they remove any foreign material that may have entered our lungs while breathing. And this provides a strong physical barrier that prevents buildup of microorganisms and other foreign material in our lungs. And defects in the function of cilia are very common in smokers, which leads to higher incidence of chest infections. The, the respiratory surface also provides various types of antimicrobial chemicals like surfactants, mucus, and defensins, which help to stop the invading microorganisms. Our stomach produces strong acids with a very low pH that kills most of the microorganisms that we accidentally ingest while eating. And also the tears in our eyes also contains special antimicrobial proteins like lysozyme that kill many pathogens. The constant flushing of tears also prevents any buildup of foreign material in our eyes, which is also an example of barrier immunity. So this is the first line of defense of our immune system, and this is known as, again, the barrier immunity. Now, what happens when microorganisms, say a bacteria or a virus, invades our barrier immunity and is successfully in entering our body? In that case, the microorganism is met by our next layer of immune system. It's known as the innate immunity. Now, to understand about the innate immunity, let's have to understand first about the meaning of the word innate. So the word innate immunity is made up of two words, in and nate. In means inside, and nate, it means born. So innate is something that you are born with. Now, why this is known as innate immunity? Okay, so the answer is this is because the innate immunity is present in our body from the time we were born. So meaning it is already present when we take birth. So this is in comparison to a third layer of immunity. So they are opposite, which is the adaptive immunity that develops after we were born. The innate immune system is an older evolutionary defense strategies as compared to the adaptive immunity that developed later. So another thing is that innate immunity is non-specific, meaning it does not have a special mechanism of action for different types of pathogens. So we will discuss the differences between the innate and adaptive later in this presentation. So now let's see the barrier immunity is also a part of the innate immunity since it is also present since birth. But for understanding this topic, it is better to divide these types of immunity into three categories. Now, let's talk about the innate immune system in detail. The defense system of the innate immunity consists of the various types of cells and the complement system. So, the different types of cells in our innate immune system are neutrophils, mast cells, basophils or basophils, dendritic cells. The next one is eosinophils, and then monocytes. And we have macrophages and NK cells or the natural killer cells. All these cells are type of white blood cells or WBCs, also known as leukocytes. When we said leukocytes, leuko meaning white and cytes meaning cells. So the neutrophils are the most abundant um, immune cells, making up about 60 to 70% of the total population of the immune cells. They form an essential part of the innate immune system. One word you will hear a lot of this system is the word phagocytosis. Phago means eating, and cytosis means by a cell. So phagocytosis in single terms is cell eating. So neutrophils are the type of phagocytes that detect and eat the pathogens within the cells. So within the cell, the neutrophils release various enzymes and kill and digest the pathogen. They are normally found in the bloodstream and are short-lived and highly mobile as they can enter parts of tissue where other cells or molecular or molecules cannot. Neutrophils are usually the first cells to respond to any infection or inflammation. So this is due to their heightened ability to sense what's going around the body by detecting special chemical signals released by pathogens and by our own body cells that tell them what's going around in the body. So if you look at the neutrophil, it has some characteristics feature. So the first thing you would notice is the multi-lobe nucleus of the cell. So this is a normal appearance of the nucleus, and this is the reason why neutrophils are also known as polymorphonuclear leukocytes. So again, polymorphonuclear. So meaning the nucleus of the cell has multiple morphologies. So meaning some neutrophils have two lobes in their nucleus, some three or four or five. So there are multiple morphologies the nucleus of these neutrophils can have. So they also known as, again, the polymorphonuclear leukocytes. So another characteristic feature you would notice in the structure of the cells is the presence of large number of channels in the cytoplasm. So on the average, about 200 to 250 granules are present in each neutrophil. And these granules contain many different types of enzymes, chemical and cytokines that have numerous functions in our immune system. So the neutrophils release enzymes like myeloperoxidase defensins, serine proteases, and various cytokines that have numerous functions in our immune system. So they are also really several other chemicals like alkaline, phosphatase, and ADPH oxidase lysozymes that help in eliminating these pathogens. So like I've told you, they are phagocytic cells that detect and eat a pathogens like bacteria. So upon ingesting the bacteria is contained in this bubble-like structure known as phagosome. So this phagosome gets fused with lysosome. So the granule of the cell which contains the lysosome in them, which is a type of enzyme. So the combination of that leads to formation of phagolysosome. So the next type known as the eosinophils. So when we said eosinophils is or also have a similar looking nucleus to neutrophils, but it usually has only two lobes, hence named as a Google nucleus. They also contain numerous cellular granules that contain different types of chemicals and enzymes. So in normal individuals, eosinophils make up about 1 to 3% of the WBC and are responsible for combating multicellular parasites and certain bacterial infections. So there are also eosinophils that play a vital role in fighting infections. When unchecked, eosinophils are responsible for tissue damage and inflammation in many diseases, including the asthma. So another type of WBC of the innate immune system is the basophils or basophils. So basophils are the least common of the WBCs, representing 0.5 to 1% of the circulating white blood cells. So basophils have a very important role in fighting parasitic infections of the body. So in addition to fighting parasitic infections, basophils play a role in preventing blood clotting as basophils contain heparin. So what is heparin? So they are also implicated in various allergic reactions. So next is the mast cells. So these are the type of immune cells that reside in the connective tissue in the mucous membranes like the lining of our respiratory and gastrointestinal system. So mast cells are associated with wound healing and defense against pathogens, but are often associated with allergy and anaphylaxis, which has serious allergic reactions that lead cause death. So mast cells also have numerous granules in them that contain abundant quantities of histamine and heparin. So what is histamine? So histamine dilates blood vessels, which produces the characteristic signs of inflammation and recruits neutrophils and macrophages. So they also help to link the innate and adaptive immunity to fight against the pathogens. So the next two important cells that we have in the innate immune system are the monocytes and the macrophages. So what's the difference between the two? So macrophages from the Greek word meaning large eaters. So they are large phagocytic glycocytes which are able to move outside of the vascular system by migrating across the walls of blood vessels and entering the areas between the cells in pursuit of invading pathogens. Similar types of cells, when present circulating in the blood, are known as the monocytes. So we call neutrophils, eosinophils, and basophils as polymorphonuclear cells. As the name indicated, their nucleus contained multiple lobes. So if you look at the word monocyte, this literally means cell with one lobe nucleus. And as you can see, the nucleus of monocytes in macrophage is round to oval with only one lobe. So of the bacterial molecules to the receptors on the surface of a macrophage triggers it to engulf and destroy the bacteria through the generation of reactive oxygen species. So pathogens also stimulate the macrophage to produce chemokines, which are special chemicals that attract other immune cells to the site of infection. So another type of innate immune cell that we have in our body is the dendritic cell. So the word dendrite means branches, and these are known as dendritic cells because they have branch-like projections from these cells. Dendritic cells are present in those tissues that are in contact with external environment, such as the skin, the inner lining of the nose, the lungs, stomach, and intestine. The dendritic cells are the type of antigen presenting cells. So antigen presenting cells detect the pathogens and they take the antigens that are present on the surface of the pathogens. So two lymphocytes. So lymphocytes are of adaptive immunity. We will discuss it. The T cells present these antigens to the lymphocytes, and this leads to attack on the pathogen by these lymphocytes and the antibodies they produce. So they are known as the antigen presenting cells as they present the antigen to the lymphocytes. Dendritic cells are also known as the Langerhans cell after the scientists who discovered them. So type 1 interferons secreted mainly by dendritic cells play a central role in the body's defense against viruses. So the last cell type that we will discuss in the cell of the immunity are the NK cells. So these are the component of the immune system that directly attack the invading microbes. Rather, NK cells destroy our own cells that have become defective, such as tumor cells or virus infected cells. So these are the various types of cells that are present in our innate immune system. Apart from the physical and chemical barriers and various types of cells, the innate immune system also has a special type of defense mechanism and known as the complement system. So this is a set of about 20 proteins and it is known as the complement system as it complements the action of the antibodies and other cells in destroying the pathogens. So meaning the complement system helps the antibodies other immune cells to destroy the invading microbes. So many species have complement systems, including the non-mammals like plants, um, fishes, and some invertebrates too. The basic mechanisms of action of the complement system is as follows. So whenever any pathogen enters a body, it gets recognized by antibodies present in our blood. So the binding of antibody to the pathogen is the most important factor for the activation of complement system. So after it is activated, a cascade of different enzymes acts on the surface of the microbe to heal. So the complement system has many different of action, but um, these are some of those actions. So this is all about the innate immunity system and the type of immunity that is present since birth. It is non-specific and comparatively weaker as compared to our third line of defense, that is the adaptive immunity system, also known as the acquired immunity system, or more rarely, the specific immune system, is composed of highly specialized systemic cells and processes that eliminate the pathogens or prevent their growth. Adaptive immunity is not present since birth and it is created in response to exposure to a foreign substance. That is why the name adaptive immunity, as it adapts accordingly to the type of threats that we are exposed to. So we have the model of working of adaptive immunity. So this is all about when a pathogen invades our first and second line of defense. It is met by the adaptive immunity, which mainly consists of lymphocytes and the antibodies they produce. And when a particular pathogen enters our body for the first time, the response of the adaptive immunity is minimal as it doesn't recognize this pathogen, yet it remembers its exposure to the pathogen and store an immunological memory of this encounter. So if you draw the first response of the adaptive immunity on a graph, it would like something like this, right? So upon the exposure of to the some pathogen or the same pathogen, there is an amplified response of the adaptive immune system, sending multiple types of lymphocytes and antibodies that are specific for that pathogen only. So this helps in successfully eliminating the pathogen. So the system is highly adaptable because once encountered, the immunological memory of that pathogen remains in our system forever. And upon subsequent invasion by the same pathogen, a full mounted defense system is already present in our body. So the cells of the acquired immune system are the T lymphocytes and the B lymphocytes. So we have two. Okay, so lymphocytes are a subset of leukocytes, meaning they are also types of WBC. So B cells and T cells are the major types of lymphocytes. So the human body has about 2 trillion lymphocytes constituting 40% of the WBCs. Their total mass is about the same as a brain or a liver. The peripheral blood contains 2% circulating lymphocytes. So the rest of them move within the tissue spaces and the lymphatic systems. The adaptive system is divided into two main types of humoral immunity, which is due to the B lymphocytes and cellular immunity, which is due to the T lymphocytes. So the T lymphocytes are again divided into two major types, the helper T cells and the cytotoxic or the killer T cells. The cytotoxic or the CD8 T cells have a major role in killing the pathogens by directly interacting with invading microbes, whereas the helper T cells or the CD4 T have an indirect but a very important role in our immune system. So the helper T cells are responsible for the proper functioning of the rest of the immune cells, including their close cousins, the CD8 cells. So they secrete large number of growth factors and their cytokines that are essential for maturation of other types of immune cells. So one of the most deadliest diseases or century, the AIDS, or also acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. So acts by killing our CD4 or the T helper cells only. The number decreases so much that it cripples our whole immune system and our body gets overwhelmed by a lot of infections that do not usually occur in healthy persons. So the other major type of lymphocyte in our are the B lymphocytes, which are responsible for the humoral immunity. So the B lymphocytes produce a special type of protein known as the antibody, which looks something like this. So as you can see, it is a Y-shaped structure in which the terminal end of the protein is especially designed to recognize and capture antigens that are present on the surface of the bacteria and other pathogens. So this of course happens after the B lymphocytes have had their first contact with the pathogen, which led to an immunological memory stored inside these cells upon subsequent encounter with the same pathogen by the B lymphocytes. So then the cell produce a large number of specific antibodies that recognize, capture the invading pathogen. So now, the antibodies do not destroy this invading pathogens by themselves, but a number of different mechanisms of our immune system, including the complement system and the use types of phagocytic cells like neutrophils. And one of the very important antibodies is known as the opsonization. This in simple words just means sugar coating a pill to make it more tasty. Okay, so now what these antibodies do is that when they recognize particular pathogen, they attach to it and they completely coat it with lots of antibodies. This is known, again, opsonization. Okay? The coated cell acts like a signal to other immune cells like the neutrophils, which come and digest the coated cell. Therefore, the antibodies mark the pathogens so they can be destroyed by the other immune cells. So the last section of our basis of immune system with the differences between the innate and adaptive immunity. So kung may natandaan ko sa ng mga terms about sa differences about innate and adaptive, pwede po natin yung i-comment down or isulat sa ating mga chat box. When we look at how each type of immunity develops, the innate immunity is something that is, okay, very good, present since our birth, while adaptive immunity is a type of immunity that develops after we are born. So talking about specificity, the innate immunity is non-specific. Okay, whereas the adaptive immunity is very, okay, very good, specific. And I hope you are clear with the meaning of the word specificity here. So innate immunity is non-specific as it doesn't have any specialized defense systems for different types of pathogens. Rather, it uses a common defense system to kill all types of pathogens and a single immune defense mechanisms of the innate immunity is able to defend against a wide variety of pathogens. So this is in contrast to the specific immune system that has special types of antibody cells that are specific and act only the pathogens they recognize. So when we look at the time at each system takes to respond to an infection, so the innate immune system has, all right, a very rapid or fast response to any infection. So since this type of immunity is already present in our body, while adaptive immune system, yes, that's correct, is slow to respond as it needs the first exposure to develop a memory of the pathogen. So if you look at the potency of each system, the innate immune system is, okay, very good. They are less potent as compared to the adaptive immunity. So which just means that the adaptive immune system has more power to kill pathogens since of course it has cells and antibodies that are made specifically for that pathogen. So one important difference between the innate and adaptive immune system is that the innate type of immunity is generally, in terms of inheritance, they are inherited from the parents and passed off to the offsprings, while adaptive immunity is not passed by the parents. So, sabihin, ito yung mga na-adapt natin with the environment. Alright? So, it cannot be inherited. So, if we look at the evolutionary basis, yan, about the evolutionary, so the innate immunity is older and is found in both vertebrates and invertebrates, while the adaptive immunity system has been developed recently and is found only in vertebrates. So the various components of the innate immune system of physical and chemical barriers, the phagocytic leukocytes, dendritic cells, and NK cells, while the adaptive is composed of T cells, B cells, and the antibodies they produce. So, this is all about the human immune system. So, thank you so much for listening and watching this presentation. So, I hope you enjoy the animations and God bless us all.
Thank you, Ma'am Alma, for giving us an informative presentation regarding the immune system. Moving on for the last topic we have for this program, please let us welcome our facilitator, Mr. Michael Roque, Teacher 2 from Orani National High School. Let us all listen with his topic, Doppler effect.
Magandang araw po sa ating lahat. Ako po ay naatasang i-discuss sa inyo ang tungkol sa Doppler effect. I am Michael C. Roque, Teacher 3 of Orani National High School, Parang-Parang. The Doppler effect is covered under learning competencies GP 12 MWS 37. Relate the frequency, source-dependent, and the wavelength of source with the motion of the sound and the listener. Our session objectives are define Doppler effect and calculate Doppler effect related problems. Let's see how far you know about Doppler effect. What is radar? Do you have any idea? How about sonar? Yes, you're right. Radar is radio detecting and ranging. How about sonar? Comment down below. Yes, I see. Sound navigation and ranging. Now let us determine whether you have a prior knowledge about Doppler effect. So this is only a true or false question. Write up on your comment and T if it's true, F if it's false. Number 1 question. Frequency and pitch is the same. Comment your answer now. Okay, that's it. Yes, the answer is F, that is false. Question number 2. Frequency emitted increases as the sound source moves towards the observer. Is it true or false? Okay, the answer for that question is false. It is the perceived frequency that is increasing, but the emitted frequency stays the same. Okay, number 3 question. Try more. There is no Doppler effect if both the source and the listener are stationary. True or false? Okay, is it comment there? Yeah? Correct! That is true. If the observer and the sound source is both stationary, there is said to be no Doppler effect. Doppler effect is defined as the relative change in the observed frequency heard by the observer relative to the motion of either the source or the listener. Doppler shift takes place when the sound source and the listener are both moving either towards or away from each other. By then, if we try to look at this one, this phenomenon was actually discovered by Christian Doppler, 1803 to 1853. He is an Austrian physicist who discovered the phenomenon known as Doppler effect. As you observe from the animation, as the sound source moves towards the observer, the frequency increases as it was heard by the stationary observer, while on the other end, the sound heard decreases. Let us have the case 1.1. The observer moves towards the source. As you see, as the observer approaching the source, the pitch heard by the observer increases. The sound increases. But the wavelength decreases because it is compressing as you move towards the source. Now, let us consider the equation F sub O is equals to F sub S multiplied by the quantity V plus V sub O over B. So let us identify one by one. F sub O is the observed frequency, while F sub S is the source frequency, while B is the velocity of sound in air, and B sub O is the observed velocity, while B sub S is the source velocity. Now let us apply. Let us analyze and solve this problem. A man is running on a road with a velocity of 5 meters per second, approaching toward a stationary ambulance, which generate a sound with a single frequency of 420 Hz. Further, the sound speed is 340 meters per second. Calculate the frequency of the sound heard by the man. Okay, of course, we need to write down the given. So what are the given on this problem? The given are the frequency source, which is the Fs is equals to 420 Hz. The velocity in the air, which is 340 meters per second. The observer velocity is 5 meters per second. The missing variable is the FO. Now, we're going to use the formula FO is equal to Fs times the quantity V plus B sub O over B. So we're going to substitute the value from our given. So let us have FO is equals to 420 Hz. That is the Fs multiplied by the quantity 340 meters per second. That's the velocity in the air plus 5 meters per second. That is the velocity of the observer towards the source over 340 meters per second, close quantity. Following the PEMDAS rule, so we're going to add, divide, and multiply. So 340 plus 5, that is 345, divide 340. Cancel all unit meter per second. Multiply it by 420 Hz. So we have now the product 426.2 Hz. Am I fast? Okay lang po ba kayo dyan? Kaya pa? Mabilis po ba? Comment nyo lang po kung mabilis o sakto lang po. Tutuloy na po ba ako sa susunod na case? We have case 1.2. The case 1.2, the observer is moving away from the source. In this case, the wavelength as the observer move away from the source is stretching. And let us have now the formula. The formula is a quite derivation from the first one. In our first formula, we have the positive velocity of the observer. In this case, we have the FO is equals to Fs multiplied by velocity minus velocity of the observer over the velocity. So let us again define. FO is the observed frequency. Again, Fs is the source frequency. V is the velocity in the air. And B sub O is the observed velocity, while Bs is the source velocity. Now, considering this formula, let us apply it on our second problem. The same problem, only on different situation. Instead of moving towards, it's now moving away from the source. Let me read it for you. A man running on a road with a velocity of 5 meters per second moved away from a stationary ambulance which generates sound with a single frequency of 420 Hertz. Further, the sound speed is 340 meters per second. Calculate the the frequency of the sound heard by the man. So what would be the perceived frequency in the man's ear? So first procedure, let us write the given. What are the given? Yes, you're right. That is 420 Hertz. This belongs to Fs. What's more? Yes, that's 340 meters per second. That's the velocity in the air. Another, yeah, the 5 meters per second. What is missing? Very good. That is the frequency observed by the moving away observer. Now, let us write the formula. Our formula then is FO is equals to Fs multiplied by the quantity B minus B sub O over B close parenthesis. By substituting the value, we will obtain FO is equals to 420 Hertz times the quantity 340 meters per second. Now this time, instead of adding, we have the subtraction. We're going to minus 5 meters per second, and then we're going to divide it with 340 meters per second. So that is 340 minus 5, that is 335, divide 340, then multiply it by 420 Hertz. So our product is 413.8 Hertz. We will observe that there is a decrease in the perceived frequency. The explanation to that is simple. Because the observer is moving away from the source. Okay pa po ba kayo dyan? Kaya pa. I will proceed on the third case. The third case is moving toward each other. Let's put it into this perspective. Two cars approach each other at 50 meters per second. It means the first car and the second car both having a velocity of 50 meters per second. When one car starts to beep its horn at a frequency of 475 Hertz, what is the wavelength of the horn as heard by the other driver when the sound velocity is 343? In our third case, it is Doppler shift. It means the two objects are moving towards each other. Then the given are the velocity in the air, which is 343 meter per second. The velocity of the source, which is 50 meter per second, and the velocity of the observer, which is also 50 meter per second. And of course, the frequency emitted by the source is 475 hertz. What is missing here is the observed frequency and the wavelength. So we have here a two-step problem. So for our formulas, we have FO is equals to Fs multiplied by the quantity B plus B sub O over B minus B sub S. That is for the perceived frequency. For the wavelength, we have the lambda is equals to V over F, where of course, the lambda is the wavelength, and the B is the velocity, and the F is the frequency. Now, let us substitute. First for the perceived or the FO. FO is equals to 475 Hertz multiply by the quantity 343 meter per second plus 50 meter per second divide 343 minus 50 meter per second. Following the MDES rule, then if we multiply the sum and the quotient with 475 Hertz, we will be having 637.1 Hertz. Do you have the same answer with me? Comment yes. You have a violent reaction? Kindly write it down. Now, the second problem here is the wavelength. What is the wavelength? Since our velocity or the B stands for the velocity in the air, that is exactly 343 meter per second for this case, divide 637.1 Hertz. Then we have Hertz is equals to cycle per second, so that would be cancelled second. So what the unit left is meter. So that is 343 divide 637.1, that is 0.54 meter. Do you have the same answer? Okay, let's proceed on case 2.2. In case 2.2, if the source and the observer are moving away from each other, I will use the same example. Two cars moves away from each other at 50 meter per second. When two cars starts to beep its horn at a frequency of 475 Hertz, what is the wavelength of the horn as heard by the other driver when the sound velocity is about 343 meter per second? It's quite similar with our first problem, only the case is moving away. Our 2.1 case is moving towards each other. This time, they are moving apart. So again, the formula, before that, let us first have the different given. So what are the given here? We have there the velocity of the source, that's 50 meter per second. The velocity of the observer, that is 50 meter per second. The frequency of the source, that's equivalent to 475 Hertz, while the velocity in the air is equivalent to 343 meter per second. Now, let us proceed. What equation is to be used? Okay, For our formula, we have FO is equals to Fs multiplied by the quantity velocity minus velocity of the observer divide velocity plus velocity of the source. And for our second problem, for the wavelength, again, lambda is equals to V over F. Now, let us proceed to the substitution. For the perceived frequency, or the FO, is equals to 475 Hertz multiply by the quantity 343 meter per second minus 50 meter per second divide 343 meter per second plus 50 meter per second. So that is 293 divided 393 times 475 Hertz. So the product is 354.13 Hertz. Now, after getting the observed frequency, we're going to proceed now. What would be the wavelength of this perceived frequency? So again, the velocity in the air is 343 meters per second. Let us divide that with the calculated observed frequency, which is 354.13 Hertz. So we have 0.97 meter. Now, that will be our kindly try this wavelength. I'll be giving you ample time. We have two problems here. Get a piece of paper. Try to answer problem 1 and 2. I'll be giving you around 10 minutes. I think that would be sufficient enough. We're going to answer problem 1 and 2. Okay? As you try to answer this one, I will play a song for you. Okay, that's it. I think you got it correctly. Let's see. Comment down below your answer. For number 1, what is your answer? How about number 2? Let's see. These are the answer. For number 1, that is 484.24 Hertz. And for number 2, that is 805.65 Hertz. For the practical usage of Doppler effect, these are just few. Doppler effect is used by the meteorologists to track storm. So that's very useful. The second one is the doctor used the Doppler effect in hospital to diagnose heart problem. And number 3, it was actually used in traffic. Traffic police make use of Doppler effect, a radar gun, to check whether the speed of an oncoming vehicle is overspeeding. I think na-experience nyo yan. From one end, may bumaril sa'yo na speed gun, at the other end, ikaw ay magbabayad ng ticket. If you experience that, that is because they use the Doppler effect. Madami pa pong usage ng Doppler effect, pero I just want to give this 3. For more details, kung gusto nyo pong mag-research, pwede nyo pong hanapin ang Doppler effect by bjjuice.com, at pwede rin po yung Conceptual Physics by Paul Hewitt, General Physics 1, of course yung Physics 4 ni Narvasa Valdez. Ayan po yung aking mga source. Pwede nyo pong hanapin yan at pwede nyo pong i-consult. Maraming salamat po sa lahat ng nakinig at nagbigay ng oras. Thank you very much. Pagpalain po tayo.
Thank you, Sir Michael, for imparting your knowledge which regards about the Doppler effect. We're now going to address everyone's queries. Sir Drew.
Ayan, maraming salamat, Ma'am Lani. At with us today are our facilitators. Nandito po yung mga facilitators natin para tugunan yung ating mga katanungan. Pero bago ang lahat, kumustahin muna natin yung ating mga facilitators ngayon. Yan, Ma'am Alma, kumusta po kayo?
Hello po, good morning po everyone. So, kunin ko na po yung opportunity to thank po si Ma'am CIT Chief, Ma'am Dr. Milagros Peñaflor, as well as yung hardworking nating super poging Sir Edwin Real Bermilio, as well as yung ating school head po, ayan, si Ma'am Raycor Sakdalan po yung aming school head. Thank you so much. Yun lang po, pampaalis ka ba?
So, mukha naman pong hindi kayo kinakabahan, Ma'am. Di ba, Ma'am Lani? Mukhang hindi kinakabahan
Yes,
si Ma'am
laging
Alma.
fresh yan si Ma'am Alma.
Opo, ayan. Sino pa po ba yung mga nanditong kasama nating facilitators? Ayan, kumusta po kayo, Ma'am RG at Tuan?
Hi po, good morning po. Good morning po to all our viewers po, to our senior high school teachers, to our EPS, Sir Bermilio. Thank you po for this opportunity to be again one of the facilitators for this webinar. And sa'yo rin po,
Ayan.
Sir Drew, thank you for guiding us all throughout.
Ay, maraming salamat din po at actually marami po kami natutunan po talaga sa inyo. Kami ni Ma'am Lani, sabi nga, tumaba na
Yes.
naman yung hindi lang puso namin ang tumaba, kundi pati ang utak namin nagtabaan ngayon. At siyempre, so ayan, Ma'am Lani.
Okay, next naman po natin kakamustahin, syempre, ang very handsome na si Sir Francis. Sir Francis, kamusta naman tayo dyan?
Good morning po, Sir Drew, Ma'am Melanie. Thank you po. Good morning. Sa lahat po ng mga viewers po natin, sa lahat po ng ating mga co-teachers, good morning po sa lahat. Ganun din po, thank you po kay Sir Edwin Vermilio sa opportunity po na ito. Sa tiwala po na binigay niya po. And then sa atin po CID Chief, Ma'am Milagros Peñaflor, maraming salamat po. Then, ayun po, maraming salamat po sa lahat ng nakinig sa araw po na to. Alam ko po marami po tayong ginagawa, marami pong reports na kailangan ipasa, pero naisingit pa rin po natin na makinig po sa araw na to. Ayun po, salamat po.
Okay, thank you very much po, Sir Francis. And now, kay Sir Michael naman po. Hi, Sir Michael. Kamusta naman po?
Hello po, ma'am. Mabuti po. Kumusta po kayo dyan? Ayos naman po dito. Salamat po sa SDO Bataan for this opportunity na meron po tayong ganito. Sabi nga, very active po ang science sa mga seminar. Yung iba nga po sabi, bakit daw sila wala? Tayo meron. Salamat po kay Sir Bermilio, tsaka po kay Mamila. Ganun po sa aming science coordinator sa junior, si Ma'am Norisa, at saka sa senior high, si Ma'am Josie. Salamat po for allowing me to participate in this webinar. Sir Menandro, thank you. And Ma'am Lan.
Yan, maraming salamat. Maraming salamat, Sir Michael. And diyaman din lang nabanggit ni Sir Michael si Ma'am Nori. Batiin ko lang si Ma'am Norisa, nandito siya. Binabati po natin si Ma'am Norisa Lustre ng Orani National High School Orani National High School, tama, parang-parang. Nandito din si Ma'am Maribeth Izon. Kasama natin yung isa sa mga vloggers ng Bataan Science Channel. Kasama nating nanonood dito, si Sir Reynan Flores. Magandang umaga sa iyo, Sir Reynan. Si Ma'am Jalsen, nandito rin po. Maria Venice Miranda. Yan. Sa mga nanonood po ngayon, Ma'am Mary Jane Aquino, maraming salamat po sa panonood po ninyo. At sa mga hindi pa po nakapanood po nitong ating webinar, after po ng webinar na ito, patuloy po ninyong mapapanood ang webinar simula nung una dito po sa ating Bataan Science Channel. So mamaya po kapag po siguro ay libre na tayo sa ating mga ginagawa ngayon, napakarami nating reports na ginagawa, may grades pa na ginagawa. So pwede nating balikan yung ating mga naging topic ngayon sa araw na ito at maging sa mga ibang Ma'am Lani, sa ibang mga naging topics pa natin dito sa ating Bataan Science Channel.
Yes po, kasi alam naman namin na very busy po tayong lahat. So, pwede nyo pong balikan yung science channel natin para po mapanood nyo po yung napakagagandang presentations po ng ating mga FASI.
Opo, ayan. So kung meron po kayong mga katanungan o may mga tanong po, pwede po kayong mag-text po sa amin, mag-chat po sa amin ng personal o kaya mag-post po kayo ng question dito sa comments box para po masagot po ng ating mga speakers ngayon. Kita nyo naman, Ma'am Lani, napakaganda at napakagwapo ng ating mga speakers.
Yes.
Diba? Talagang busog na busog, hindi lamang yung ating isip at yung mga mata natin sa kanila. Di po ba?
Tama ka dyan, sir.
Ayan.
Diba,
Alam mo,
fresh
ma'am,
sila.
ang tagal na natin silang kasama sa mga ganitong gawain. Parang pagka sila nagtotalk, excited pa rin ako makinig kahit na napakinggan ko na sila dati. Yung mga tipong parang gusto kong paulit-ulit silang narinig na mag-discuss sa mga topic kasi talagang napakahuhusay.
At
Siyempre,
saka, sir, ang dami nating natututunan sa kanila.
tama po yun. Siyempre kapag ganito na halimbawa, pag masipag yung mga nasa division office natin, masipag yung ating CID, masipag yung ating mga supervisors, lalong-lalo na si Sir Edwin, napaka-visionary ng ating EPS. So lahat tayo sa ibaba ay talagang nagiging masipag at nagiging mahusay. Kaya maraming salamat talaga sa kanila kasi talagang nagiging mahusay talaga ang mga guro natin. Lumalabas talaga yung mga talents at saka husay natin. Di ba, Ma'am Lani?
Yes po. Dati yan si
Ayan.
Sir Francis mahiyain. Pero ngayon, papanood mo na siya. Nagla-live na siya.
Ayan. So, di ba ba? Ako din, medyo kinakabahan ako dati sa ganito. Pero ngayon, medyo tumataba yung ating muka sa sa pagla-live. O, teka lang, may nag-beep po dito. Nag-beep yung aking cellphone. Basahin ko lang po. Meron pong may question po dito. Pwede na po ba natin sagutin yung question? Sa mga speakers natin, ready na po ba tayo?
Okay po, sir.
Meron pong nagtanong dito, parang physics po yata ang tanong natin, address po. Sa physics po itong unang tanong po natin dito from Orani District po. Basahin ko lang po. Ang nakalagay, how does Doppler sonar work when it bounces a sound wave of a moving object? Yan. Ulitin ko po yung tanong, how does Doppler sonar work when it bounces a sound wave of a moving object? So yan po yung katanungan natin ngayon. Siguro na late po ito kaya ganito yung tanong niya. Sir Michael?
Bro?
Sir Michael, mukhang ano yata?
Nagluloko yung aking signal.
Nagluloko
po yung signal ko yan. So, sige po, narinig ko naman po yung tanong.
Okay po.
Actually, it works by measuring the change in the frequency of the returning wave to determine the velocity of the object. Ganun po siya nag-work. Dinedetermine niya lang muna yung change in the frequency of the returning wave. Malalaman niya na yung velocity ng object.
Opo. Sir, ayun, opo. Tama yun, sir. Actually, naalala ko to nung nagtuturo pa ako ng physics noong araw. Isa ito sa mga interesting topic talaga yung Doppler effect. No? Nakakatuwa ito. Di po ba, Ma'am Lani? So sana nasagot po yung ating katanungan ng taga-Orani National District. Ayaw po niya sabihin ang kanyang pangalan. Sabi niya, hindi ko naman po pwedeng sabihin na secret lang po ito, sir. Kailangan po talaga di po ba? Kailangan po sabihin yung kanyang question. Ayan. Sige po, baka po meron pa pong mga nagte-text na tanong.
Yes, sir. Meron pa pong isang nag-message po dito, sir. Meron pong tanong para naman po kay Ma'am Alma. Mahal na mahal ng mga tiga Hermosa, si Ma'am Alma. Ang katanungan po ay nanggaling sa Hermosa National High School. Okay po. Medyo po ito. Anong tawag dito? Napapanahon ang kanyang tanong, Ma'am Alma. Okay, so ito po ang tanong. Kinakabahan na po ba si Ma'am Alma? Pero alam ko laging prepared yan si Ma'am Alma. Okay, here's the question po, ma'am. Is it better to get natural immunity to COVID-19 rather than the immunity from a vaccine? And, di ba, Ma'am Alma, gustong-gusto niya magtanong sa'yo, how long will vaccine immunity last?
Alright, so first of all, thank you po sa question and thank you po sa nagtanong. Alam naman po natin lahat na COVID-19 is nagkalat na po yung news and articles from our social media, gayon din po sa mga reports. And the question is that, which is better, parang ganun, no? Which is better, the natural immunity ba ng COVID-19 o a vaccine? All right. So, as we all know that COVID-19 is a very serious virus na kapag tayo naapektuhan nito is hanggang sa ngayon ay inaaral pa rin or dinedevelop pa rin yung vaccine. So it is said that vaccinated is expected to generate immunity more reliably without risk of a severe illness or death. And unfortunately, with SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus that caused the COVID-19, it seems that in some cases, there is a kind of inhibition or depression sa ating antiviral response na kung saan nagre-result ito ng massive damage sa ating mga tissues. Kaya nga kapag nagkaroon ng major inflammation, it's either kung malakas talaga immune system mo, pwede kang makarecover with the COVID or baka mag-burst out, lalo na yung mga at risk, pwede itong ma-damage. And without actually clearing that virus. And then, there is always a safety risk to consider. And according to one of the scientists or the medical practitioners who has done research and study about the vaccine and the COVID-19, it is said that a vaccine has a better chance of making sure that we generate our immunity that is not going to deteriorate. So siguro naitanong ito dahil may nag-trending sa Twitter na parang senator yata na sinasabi doon na mas okay yatang magkaroon ng natural immunity with COVID-19 kaysa sa vaccine. Pero syempre, we always believe in medical practitioners who has done research and studied this kind of virus. And until now, sabi nila, yung gaano daw ba katagal ang vaccine, yung vaccine immunity last, di pa hanggang sa ngayon, inaaral pa rin. Pero may sinasabi sa ilang mga articles na nababasa ko sa Facebook, it lasts for 2 to 3 years. Kaya lang, we need to annually vaccinated para daw ma-boost yung vaccine na ito. Okay? And that's why hanggang sa ngayon, pinag-iingat pa rin tayo ng ating government, ng ating mga medical practitioners na magsuot pa rin ng face mask, face shields, and then regular ng wash ng hands, and also social distancing is very important pa rin to prevent this COVID-19. Okay? So that's all. Thank you.
Ayun, maraming salamat po.
Okay po.
Maraming salamat po, Ma'am Alma. Actually, totoo yan, Ma'am Lani. Napaka-trending ng vaccine kasi iba't ibang bansa nag-uunahan sila sa paggawa ng vaccine kasi unang-una, bukod sa makakatulong ito sa maraming tao, din kasi, pagka naaprubahan sila, di ba, medyo may konting income din sila dito kasi napaka-necessity. Essential yung vaccine na gagawin po nila na lahat ng bansa ay nag-uunahan. Dito sa atin, maraming naging issue tungkol sa vaccine pero agree ako kay Ma'am Alma na importante yung vaccine kaysa magkaroon ng herd immunity kasi hindi natin alam kung gaano kalakas ang resistensya ng bawat tao. Lalo na sa atin ngayon, yung pag-inom ng mga vitamins para mag-improve yung ating immune system, minsan na-neglect ng mga iba sa atin yun kasi hindi naman kumpleto yung kinakain natin araw-araw para dun sa immune system natin. Kaya good para sa akin yung magkaroon tayo ng vaccine. Ako, Ma'am Lani, hindi ako natatakot magpa-vaccine. Ikaw ba?
Ako medyo kinakabahan po kasi ako na with all honesty, kinakabahan kasi ako for the vaccine. Pero din po, if it is already checked and proven effective naman, syempre kasama nga tayo sa tinatawag na essential workers. Mahal ko yung pamilya ko. So, syempre, magpapa-vaccine po ako. Okay
Tama
po.
po. Pero kahit na nag-vaccine tayo, tama yung sabi ni Ma'am na yung talagang yung social distancing, talagang yung pagsuot ng face mask. Yung pagsuot po ng face mask, mahalaga po na pati ilong naka-cover. May nakikita po tayo ngayon na bibig lang po. Kapag bibig lang po ang naka-cover. Oo, yan. Sa baba. Kasi pagka bibig lang ang naka-cover, may protection yung ibang tao pero ikaw wala kang protection kasi bukas naman ng ilong mo.
Dapat, Tsaka ang
Ayan,
nakalabas po dapat is yung kulay blue ang nasa
yung kulay
labas.
blue.
Yung
Ayun.
kulay blue po yung nasa labas. Lagi po
Yung mga
nating
ano,
tatandaan, prevention is better than cure.
cure. Ayan,
Opo.
maraming salamat Ma'am Lani. At
Thank you
napatuloy
din.
na nagte-text. May nag-text pa rin sa akin isa rito. Teka
Mhm.
lang, hahanapin ko lang na natabunan niya yung kanyang text. Eto. Ang text niya, eto. Para naman ito sa fertilization. Siguro kay ano to, kay Sir Francis. Tama po Sir Francis. Ito, sa inyo po siguro itong tanong na ito. So nakalagay po, from ano po ito, Dinilupihan District po ito. Ang nagtanong. Opo. Babanggitin ko ba yung pangalan? Parang ayaw niya pabanggit yung kanyang pangalan. Baka daw kasi hanapin ni Sir Francis at sige. Pero hindi po. Ito po ang kanyang tanong. What are the advantages and disadvantages of internal fertilization? Ulitin ko po yung tanong. What are the advantages and disadvantages of internal fertilization? Ayan po, Sir Francis.
Okay, thank you po, Sir Drew. May audio po ba, sir?
Yes po, sir. Loud
Okay
and
po.
clear po.
Okay, so the advantages of internal fertilization are that the fertilized egg is protected from the predators or from the other organisms and from the harsh environments. Thus, it ends with the higher chances of survival. So also there is a lesser chance of desiccation of the gametes. For the disadvantages, Sir Drew,
Yes po.
of internal fertilization are that there are lesser number of offspring produced at a given time because it is sometimes difficult for the male and female to come into intimate contact. So additionally, the risk of STD or the sexually transmitted diseases also increases.
Okay, sir. Tama po, sir. At saka napakamahal po sir nung external fertilization.
Yes, sir.
Naalala ko parang may artista yata na gumawa niyan, gumastos talaga ng million-million. Hindi ko alam kung parang may isa ring isang celebrity couple, yung isa parang politician din na nagganyan sila, parang external fertilization na talagang million talaga ang ginastos nila doon. Kasi lahat ng sustansya na ibibigay dapat ng katawan natin ay sir, ibibigay sa kanila ng artificial.
Yes, sir. Yung iba naman po, sir, pine-preserve po nila sa isang laboratory po yung mga sex cells po nila.
Opo, ayun. Tapos gagamitin lang pagka gusto na po nila. Ang kagandahan lang doon, Sir Ma'am Lani, kagandahan doon hindi makakaranas ng pagbubuntis yung parents. Tama po ba? May ganun po bang o makakaranas pero hindi po masyadong mahirap para sa kanila. Sa mga hayop po ba, sir, na applicable po din ito, sir? Yung external na
Yes, sir, pwede rin po.
okay.
Lalo na po, sir, sa mga animals po natin na malapit na pong maubos or nasa endangered species na po sila.
So ayun po pala, napakaganda po pala kung mai-apply natin sa kanila ito, mapipreserve yung lahi ng mga hayop na pwede na
ma-apply dito sa atin yan, no?
Opo, ayun. So maraming salamat po, Sir Francis. Ayan, alam po ninyo may mga nagtatanong pa dito, napakarami pa mga questions dito. Siguro, Ma'am Lani, pakibasa na lang po yung last question natin for this morning.
Okay po. Ang last question po natin is regarding convection po. I think this is for Ma'am RG Atuan. Ma'am,
Yes
the
po.
question po is from Magsaysay National High School. Ay, sinabi ko ba yung school?
Ayan, patay
Okay,
ka,
here's
palo
the
ka.
question po. Is there other cause that drives the movement of plates aside from the convection current po?
Okay po. So as what I have mentioned, one of the leading cause of the movement of plates is through convection current. But there are other suggested mechanisms such as the ridge push and the slab pull. So what do we mean when we say ridge push? It happens at the diverging plate boundaries where the plate moves away from each other. That causes new formation of crust. And that new crust or new lithosphere has a higher elevation. It is warmer, and therefore it is less dense compared to the surrounding lithosphere or plates. So that higher elevation of plates, the gravity pushes that ridge further away. Those older or colder lithosphere. And when we talk about slab pool, it has something to do with subduction, no? The older and the colder, which is more dense compared to the new ones, will sink or will subduct, and that causes motion, and that causes the movement of plates. So those are the two suggested mechanisms, the slab pull and the ridge push, aside from the convection current. So that's the answer po, sir.
Ayun,
Okay,
maraming
thank you po.
salamat po. Ayan, maraming salamat po, Ma'am RG. Ayan, nung nagtuturo ako ng grade 10 yata. Ayan yung is mga lessons na inaabangan ng mga bata, yung sa movements of plates. Lalo na pag-question sila yung mga paglindol, mga pagyanig, di po ba? Mga bakit nagkahiwa-hiwalay yung mga lupa. So napaka-interesting po na topic po sa kanila. So maganda po yung ganitong pagkakataon na na-explain natin ng mas malalim. At hindi lamang po ang kagandahan po dito sa ating channel, Ma'am Lani, at sa mga facilitators natin, gandi sa mga nanonood ngayon at sa makakapanood pa, ang kagandahan dito sa ating Bataan Science Channel, hindi lamang mga teachers yung natututo dito. Ganon din yung mga students natin.
Students, yes.
Opo, pagka napadaan sila sa channel natin, mapapanood nila yung mga talk natin, matututo rin talaga sila at napaka-informative talaga ng ating Bataan Science Channel. Kaya samantalahin ko na siguro pagkakataon na ito, Ma'am Lani, na pasalamatan yung ating program management team. Okay? Maraming salamat po sa ating program management team. Nandiyan po sa pangunguna po siyempre ng ating EPS, si Sir Edwin Bermilio. Ganon din yung ating si Sir Tracy Reyes ng Pagalanggang National High School. Maraming salamat din po kala Sir Raymond Kaling ng Magsaysay. Ganon din po si Ma'am Charmaine Bataan. Maraming salamat po kay Ma'am Brisilda Bicaldo sa paggawa po ng mga forms. Maraming salamat po sa pagtulong po ninyo para maging successful po yung webinar na ito ng Senior High School. Maraming salamat po. Ma'am Lani, baka may gusto pang sabihin o last message yung ating mga facilitator. Umpisahan ko kay Ma'am RG. Ma'am RG, baka po may last message po ninyo.
Thank you po sa lahat po ng nanood, and to our EPS nga po, Sir Bermilio, to our CID Chief, Ma'am Milagros po, and then to you, sir, our moderator, Ma'am Melanie and Sir Menandro Reyes po. Thank you po for this opportunity na nairaos po na po namin. So we're so grateful po. Yun po.
Ay, maraming salamat din po. Yes, Ma'am Alma.
Yes po, kanina ko po sinasabi, lagi po ako nagpapasalamat. Thank you po ulit, Sir Drew and Ma'am Lani, our moderators. Sa ating CID Chief, Ma'am Milagros Peñaflor, to our Education Program Supervisor, said Edwin Riel Bermilio. Pinakakadiin ko si Riel kasi gusto niya na may Riel yung kanyang name. Ayan po. And syempre sa aking school head po namin na si Dr. Raker Sakdalan, kayo hindi po ang aming OIC, Assistant Principal, si Ma'am Lenny Caicedo, ang mga ka-science department ko po, and sa lahat po ng mga nanood ngayon, hello science teachers, maraming salamat po.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you
Lani.
din po, Ma'am Alma. Okay, let's hear it from Sir Michael naman po. Sir Michael, baka po meron ka pa pong gustong sabihin.
Maraming salamat po. Sa SDO Bataan, headed by Sir Alip, din niyo po pinapasalamatan sa Sir Alip. Siya po yung nag-approve niyan. Sir Alip, maraming salamat po. At syempre, our CID Chief, Ma'am Milagros Peñaflor, thank you very much po. Sir Edwin Riel Bermilio, maraming salamat po. Salamat din po doon sa ating mga school head na pinayagan tayo, sa ating mga science coordinator, sa lahat ng teachers, at especially nagpapasalamat ako sa wife ko, si Madam Juliet, kasi siya muna ang naglaba. Ayan, salamat at binigyan ako ng time para gawin yung presentation. Maraming salamat. Sir Menandro, maraming salamat din. Huwag mo nang ulitin to, ha?
Okay, thank you po, sir. Napakabait ng iyong asawa, sir. Okay, let's hear from Sir Francis naman po. Sir Francis.
Ayun po, good morning po ulit sa lahat. Gusto ko lang din po magpasalamat sa lahat po ng mga teachers, sa mga students po na nakinig po sa araw na to. Then, makungopya na lang po ako ng pagbati. Thank you po kay Sir Dr. Edwin Ariel Bermilio and sa ating po CID Chief, Ma'am Milagros Peñaflor. Maraming salamat po. Then, shout out ko na lang po yung aming school head, Sir Omar G. Magalas. Good morning po sa iyo, sir. And then sa aking head teacher po, science head teacher, Sir Erasto Agkis, at sa kanyang napakagandang girlfriend, Ma'am Lou Agkis, sa aming assistant principal. Then, baka po pwedeng mag-announce, sir, bukas po. Sa January 21 po yung aming retrieval and distributions po ng modules, kasabay na rin po ng issuance po ng SF9 or yung ating report card po. Thank you po.
Ayun, maraming salamat po, sir, at sa mga facilitators po natin. So, tama po, ang ganitong pagkakataon ay talagang napakaganda para sa mga estudyante at maging para sa atin at maging sa mga parents po, mga parents na nagtuturo ng kanilang mga anak sa kanilang mga bahay. Opo, na-inform sila at pwede nilang i-suggest sa mga anak nila na panuorin ito o pwede nilang mas palaliman pa yung kanilang kaalaman. Nakakatuwa po. So, kung wala na po tayong tanong with that, thank you so much for the facilitators for answering all queries from our participants. We truly appreciate everyone's presence, especially our facilitators for taking time in sharing your knowledge and our participants also for listening. Your willingness to be enhanced and improved was seen with your active participations. And of course, the person behind this program, Dr. Edwin Riel Bermilio, thank you for opening an opportunity for us to grow in this field. May God bless you more.
And we would also like to extend our warmest gratitude to our CIDG Chief, Mamila Milagros Peñaflor, for supporting and allowing us to learn more even in the midst of pandemic. Truly, we are so blessed to have you, ma'am. And with that, we want to thank you all for staying with us throughout the event. We hope that we have learned a lot from this webinar. If you have any more questions that we are not able to answer, please contact the Facebook account of our presenters, and we will post the different link and addresses on our screen, and we'll also post a recording of this webinar on Bataan Science channel in a few days.
Okay, once again, thank you, presenter, and thank you everyone for attending today's program, the second season of webinar series on science content and teaching strategies for second quarter of school year 2020 to 2021. On behalf of DepEd Division of Bataan, thank you for joining us today and have a great day. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat.
Thank you po. God bless po.